The default settings in Python are not always getting you to the maximum possible frame rate. There are a few possibilities to optimize your frame rate so that it reaches the promised value or even more than that. This video will show the most common features to help you reach the frame rate you want. When you open Pylon and click on the camera you want to optimize, all the features show up below. Now in the Features window, click on Common Tasks and select Controlling the frame rate. Now everything that impacts the frame rate is highlighted in orange. Under Image Format Control, you can set the area of interest to meet your requirements. This does affect the frame rate. By reducing your area of interest, you can usually increase the frame rate. If you want to try this out, make sure the camera is not operating at that moment. If the camera is in continuous shot, you will not be able to make any changes to the area of interest. It is important to note here that the height affects the frame rate a lot more than the width does. Another way to optimize your frame rate is to choose the right pixel format. For this feature, you also have to stop the continuous shot, like for changing the area of interest, because otherwise you will not be able to change this feature. As you can see here, going from Mono 8 to Mono 12 lowers the frame rate. If you do need Mono 12 for your application, you might want to try Mono 12 Packed since it ups the frame rate compared to Mono 12 because the bit format is reduced from 16 to 12 bit. The next category that can help you to increase the frame rate is acquisition control. The influence of the exposure time is important if you want to optimize your frame rate. If you have the exposure time set to a high value, it may take longer to take one picture and therefore your frame rate is lower. If your source of light is sufficient, lowering the exposure time might be an option to increase your frame rate.
If you're using a USB camera, the bandwidth is another factor that can change the frame rate. Under Device Control, you can find a category called Device Link Throughput Limit Mode. It is usually set to On, so you can change the amount of bandwidth used. To find out the maximum bandwidth, set the Device Link Throughput mode to Off. The number listed next to the Device Link Current Throughput now is the maximum bandwidth. Now you can enter that number as the throughput limit. The higher you set that limit, the higher your frame rate will be, but make sure that your hardware can work with the amount of data. Under Stream Parameters, you can adjust the maximum transfer size. Even though this does not directly impact the frame rate, it might have an indirect impact. The suggestion here is to maximize the transfer size because this is going to reduce the CPU load. If you're using a Gig E camera, the packet size is another factor that can change the frame rate. Under the category Transport Layer, you will find a feature called Packet Size. By adjusting this parameter, you can impact the frame rate. It is recommended that you set the packet size to 9000. Every value greater than 1500 is considered a jumbo packet. This reduces the CPU load, but you have to make sure your NIC supports jumbo packets. If it does, you might still need to adjust the settings. Under Transport Layer Control, you can adjust the interpacket delay. For the maximum frame rate, we recommend you set it to 0 if your system can work with that. Otherwise, you should set it as low as possible. In the same category, you can find the Bandwidth Reserve mode and Bandwidth Reserve. The standard settings give you a bandwidth reserve of 10%. You can optimize your frame rate by changing the bandwidth reserve mode from standard to performance. This will give you a bandwidth reserve of 3%.